Hey, you're watching HuffPost Live. I'm Mark Lamont Hill. Stand Your Ground is back in the news. A white man shot and killed an unarmed teenager in Jacksonville, Florida. The shooter, Michael Dunn, is using the Stand Your Ground defense, the same one George Zimmerman is using to explain how he fatally shot Trayvon Martin. The incident happened after a dispute over loud music in the parking lot of a gas station in Jacksonville. Joining us from Washington, D.C. to discuss this is Associate Politics Editor Lee Owens. Lee, thanks for joining us. You've been following this story. What's the latest?
Well, what I've heard today was that the shooter, Mr. Dunn, his charges actually went from first-degree murder to today actually being changed to second-degree murder. Now, there hasn't actually been a word as to what the cause of that has been, but I actually heard that his lawyer today stated that the defendant, Dunn, actually saw a shotgun outside of the window that that he actually shot out of the SUV. So I'm not sure yet if that is the cause of the decreased charges or what, but overall the case is just very, very sad.
It sounds messy too, and I want to bring up a photo here so you can see exactly who these people are. On the right, of course, is Michael Dunn, who's the alleged shooter. On the left is Jordan Russell Davis, the young man who was killed. In fact, he's not the alleged shooter. We know for a fact that he shot him. The question is
Absolutely.
everything else, right? So
Right.
help walk us through what happened in that parking lot, based on what we know, based on what reports say.
Right. Well, what we know now is that there were 4 black teenagers between the ages of 17 and 18 sitting in a SUV in the parking lot of a gas station, apparently listening to very loud music. Now, Mr. Dunn and his girlfriend actually pulled into the parking lot of the gas station. He sent his girlfriend into the store to actually purchase a bottle of wine. Now, while she was in the gas station purchasing the wine, he apparently drove alongside of the SUV and asked that the teenagers turn the music down. Now, everything from there is a bit sketchy because we don't know yet what the exchange was. All we know that there was an exchange between Dunn and the deceased, Mr. Davis, which caused the shooting. So after the exchange, Dunn actually shot 8 or 9 shots into the SUV. Multiple shots hit Mr. Davis, and he died as a result of those gunshot wounds.
Were the young men armed?
We don't know. They're claiming that they weren't armed. There was no gun found. But again, earlier today, Dunn's lawyer said that they're claiming that there was a shotgun, that he saw a shotgun. Now that actually is the latest that has occurred in the case.
But there's nothing corroborating
There's
that.
Nothing corroborating that at all. No, there was no gun found. No.
Okay.
So as far as we know now, he had no just cause to shoot at that SUV outside of the fact that he claims he felt threatened.
Which would fit within the stand your ground sort of parameters.
Well, that's sketchy as well. The stand your ground law is pretty sketchy in and of itself because it doesn't necessarily say that, because you feel threatened, you can murder an individual. It essentially says, and I'm paraphrasing, that you have to feel as though your life is in imminent danger. Now, that's relative. I can be walking down the street with a hoodie behind someone, and because of the color of my skin, they feel that their life is in imminent danger. Are they allowed to turn around and shoot me because of that? So, again, the law is not definitive, and it's very unclear, which is why I personally believe it needs to either be revamped or completely dissolved altogether.
Well, that's something that a lot of people are saying. We have a comment coming in right now from Really No Really who says, "Not again. I am really coming to loathe Florida." These kinds of stories continue to come up, and it continues to make a lot of people frustrated, anxious, maybe even angry, irrespective of what happened in that parking lot, at the possibility that a law like this can complicate matters and really make it difficult to determine who's guilty, who's not, and whether that guilt aligns with our value system as a nation. I want to bring in our community. Right. Joining me right now in our Google Hangout is Jeremiah Gook, who's also joining us from Washington, D.C. We're also joined by Jewel Fryer in Chico, California, and Matthew Tratner in New York. Jewel, I'm going to go to you. I'm hearing this story, and Trayvon Martin hasn't been resolved, and it seems as if we're almost stockpiling these tragic stories that involve guns and gun violence.
Yeah, we do, and again, it just keeps happening in Florida, and everything about this one really sounds sketchy. I don't think this was a stand your ground even so much as with Trayvon, because at least George Zimmerman, I think that was more thought out. He had been, on this sort of tirade against robberies and stuff in the neighborhood, and I think he was more aware of this law and had it in mind when he committed his crime. And in this case, I think, the guy came from a wedding. He's very likely drinking, and he got mad and got into an altercation and shot somebody. And then, once he talks to his lawyers, this is the law, or this is what they invoke on it. It's just not okay.
No,
And the example that you used about going down the street in your hoodie and somebody can turn around and shoot you, you could also use the rule in reverse and go, well, this person's obviously going to think that I'm going to hurt them, and they might try to turn around and shoot me, so I might as well shoot them first. What's the difference?
I mean, it does invite those kinds of conversations. Your point, though, about George Zimmerman perhaps being a more thought out killing speaks actually lead to the reduction in charges. As one of our commenters, Nikon, points out, first degree has to do with premeditation. So I don't think anyone thinks that this guy, Mr. Dunn,
Right.
thought about doing this before he got to the liquor store. It sounds like whatever happened was something that he didn't anticipate before he got into that parking lot, and neither did the young people. And even if he's dead wrong, it doesn't sound as if it was something that would qualify or constitute first-degree murder. Is that safe to make?
Right. It's an argument that got out of control.
Right. And Lee, in some ways, it's actually probably better if he is guilty for it to be second-degree murder, because the last thing you want to do is overcharge someone and have a jury let someone go because
No conviction, right? No a second-degree murder conviction is definitely better than a first degree, or no conviction at all. Absolutely.
Right, or first-degree acquittal. Right.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to throw something out there and just say that this problem with the stand your ground law is a problem. It's problematic for two reasons. It's problematic because the law essentially allows an individual to actually become a vigilante. And what we have in our society, and have always had in our society, is this sort of perception about young black men by the white community, not all whites, but a lot of whites, who actually, at times feel intimidated. So that perception, coupled with this stand your ground law that will allow someone to assert their authority in a way that can be fatal, is just a horrible combination. So there just has to be some kind of discussion and some kind of resolve when it comes to, the perception of young black men in general. Every black man that wears a hoodie is not a threat, is not trying to. Every black man that is listening to loud music, is not going to try and pull a drive-by. So these perceptions, in a lot of cases, are what I've seen lead, to these tragedies. So you can't have a law like that with that kind of perception in place, because it's just going to lead to more killings.
We have comments coming in. I'm Dropping Dime says, Florida is becoming the new Mississippi. Professor JT says, FAMU, that's Florida A&M University, hazing, people killing people in Florida, definitely not the nice, quiet state to go and retire at, like back in the day. I can't help but agree, Jeremiah. Florida just seems to be a metaphor for everything that's wrong with the country, from voting patterns to killings to hazing. I mean, Florida is getting a pretty bad rep these days.
Well, I was born in Miami, but we left after I was only a year and a half old, so I don't have a lot of Florida experience. But what we need to not lose sight of here is that the stand your ground laws were, the original one was put in Florida with the help of the Conservative American Legislative Exchange Council, which is also the same group that was behind a lot of photo ID laws and other forms of voter suppression this last round. So it has an ugly history, but it's been copied. Around half of the states in the country now have these laws, so this is not just Florida. The Urban Institute has done research on how these have played out, and it shows that 11 times more frequently in situations where white people kill black people, they are given the pass that these laws give, whereas if a black person kills a white person, it's 11 times less that the law will then be applied to them. It's really ugly. And the other thing that needs to be pointed out about the law is that the big difference is they remove the requirement to run away. Traditionally, there's always been a right to defend yourself, even with mortal harm, if you perceive that threat to you or your loved ones. But you had to run away first. It was a last resort, and these laws remove that. And this is just a almost kind of pathetically tragicomic situation of someone who clearly could have gotten away. And
Right.
if this was a problem, get back in the car and leave.
Right. That's what we used to say. A good run is better than a bad stand. Now we're encouraging people to have bad stands or to arm themselves to prevent bad stands. And it's really dangerous. And the race piece that you mentioned is really interesting. Free Humanity, one of our commenters, also weighed in and said, sadly, this law was intended for home invasions and victims of domestic violence. Yet a woman who fired a warning shot, just to give one example, with no injury, against her abusive husband is serving 20 years. She is African American, of course. This seems to be a recurring thing here that I think.
I'm not sure if that's actually right, though, because under the Castle Doctrine, this already existed. If someone came into your house, you had the presumption that you didn't have to run away and a presumption of mortal harm. Same thing with vehicular invasion. Where this really applies is outside of your home.
Yeah, actually, as I'm reading it, I think you're right. But the second part of her claim was what I actually found interesting, because I agree with everything you just said, which is that when there are moments where this could be used in ways that seem morally principled and right, like this woman, and we've talked about this on HuffPost before, this woman who fired a warning shot to scare away an abusive husband, she's in jail. So it seems to me that the selective application of the law along race lines quite often, and probably class lines, if we were to subject it to some scrutiny.
It's a huge issue. I mean, if you did hop on to what Lee said also about fear of on a race-based issue, I mean, it's pretty clear. This will sound kind of flagrant, but I think it's not. And plenty of people, including Seattle's former police chief who wrote about this, will say white people are scared of black men. And so the idea of enabling white people to act on their fear more freely rather than using their minds and running away is just insane.
I agree. Nikon writes in again. It says, "Stand your ground is especially moronic. Can anyone think of an instance, where this law worked well?" Matthew, before we move on, I wanted your thought on this. Do we have room as a nation to deal with this crisis? I mean, this particular one. What I mean is, we have Trayvon. Everyone knows Trayvon. Trayvon's been at the tip of our tongues and in the forefront of our minds for almost a year now. Can we fit another one of these? Can we reach critical mass and actually do something? Will one of these stories, do one of these stories have to give in the sense that we just can't have too many outrages at once? I mean, how do we deal with another one of these?
Well, you would hope that that people would use this as a learning experience. To Jeremiah's point, these laws basically give people who have guns, they empower them to go out and have this aggressive behavior, which can definitely lead to these kinds of instances. I mean, this Mr. Dunn had a ample opportunity in a lot of different times to walk away from this, but the fact that he knows he's got this law behind him, I'm sure at some point pushed him forward. So the fact is that we have to structure these laws so that they're protecting the people that they are supposed to protect, which is, for instance, if we're talking about home invasions and things like that, make them very specific rather than sort of give people an open-ended way to just go out and say, this person looks suspicious, this person is bothering me, and so now I'm going to shoot them.
Yeah. Oh, it's a rough circumstance. Lee, thanks for keeping us updated on this, and of course we'll have you back as more details come in. Thanks for the great work you're doing down there, keeping us updated on this. We'll talk to you soon.